Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the biggest warship he had ever seen slowly turn away from them. The Zephyrian battlecruiser was 3 times the size of his cargo, freighter New Dawn, and could destroy entire planets with its weapons. But today it was running away from his small human ship like a scared animal. Lisa Turner looked up from her communication station with a big smile on her face. She had been working on human ships for 5 years now, and still found it amazing how other species acted around them. The young woman pressed a button, and the main screen showed the alien commander trying to contact them. The Zephyrian looked like a giant insect with compound eyes that sparkled in the light. Commander Thexhigh was known throughout 3 galaxies as one of the most dangerous military leaders alive. His fleet had conquered dozens of worlds, and his name made entire species surrender without a fight. But now he was speaking to Jake with a shaky voice that betrayed his fear. "Human vessel, this is Commander Thexhigh of the Zephyrian 6th Fleet," the alien said while his clawed hands moved nervously over his control panel. "We wish you safe passage and will keep our distance from your ship. We do not want any trouble with humans." Jake nodded calmly, even though inside he was still amazed by how much the galaxy had changed. 3 years ago, this same commander would have destroyed their ship without even asking questions. Now he was practically begging them to ignore his presence. "Thank you, Commander," Jake replied in a steady voice. "We appreciate your courtesy and wish you safe travels as well." The communication ended, and the bridge fell silent for a moment. Everyone watched as the massive alien fleet changed course to avoid crossing paths with their single cargo ship. Danny Brooks, the ship's engineer, started laughing first. The sound broke the tension, and soon the whole crew was chuckling at the situation. "Remember when we used to hide from ships like that?" Danny asked while wiping tears from his eyes. He was an older man who had worked in space for 20 years and remembered the old days when humans were just another weak species trying to survive. Amy Davis pulled up the star charts on her navigation screen and showed their planned route to the Rim territories. This was supposed to be the most dangerous part of space, where pirates and raiders attacked any ship they could find. But human ships traveled through here, now like they owned the place. "Those days are long gone," Amy said while marking their path on the display. Everything changed after what happened at Kepler Station. Now every alien in 3 galaxies knows better than to mess with humans. The crew grew quiet at the mention of Kepler Station. It was the event that had changed everything for humanity and made them the most feared species in known space. What started as a simple research mission had ended with humans earning a reputation that made even the deadliest predators think twice about fighting them. Jake remembered hearing about Kepler Station when he was still working on colony ships in the inner systems. The news had spread across human space like wildfire and changed how every human felt about their place in the galaxy. They were no longer the weak newcomers who had to be careful around stronger species. They were something new and dangerous. "Incoming. Message from the cargo bay," Lisa announced. "The Altarian passengers want to know why we changed course." Jake sighed and realized he would have to explain the situation again. The Altarians were a peaceful trading species who had hired human transport because it was the safest way to travel through dangerous space. They probably did not understand why the Zephyrian fleet had run away from them. "Tell them we encountered a military patrol, but everything is fine," Jake said. "No need to worry them with details about our reputation." The truth was that human ships had become like mobile safe zones in the galaxy. Pirates avoided them, raiders ran from them, and even military fleets gave them plenty of space. Insurance companies charged almost nothing to cover human vessels because the risk of attack was so low. But this protection came with a price. Other species looked at humans differently now. Some showed respect, others showed fear, and a few showed something that looked like worship. Jake was not sure he liked any of those reactions. He preferred the old days when humans were just another species trying to make their way in the galaxy. "Sir, we have 3 more ships on long range." "Sensors," Amy reported. "They look like Void Hunter vessels approaching from the asteroid belt." The Void Hunters were energy beings that fed on the life force of living creatures. They were invisible to most sensors and could phase through solid matter to attack ships from inside. Entire fleets had been destroyed by just a few Void Hunters. Working together, Jake watched the sensors as the 3 alien ships detected the new dawn and immediately changed course. They did not even try to get closer or investigate what kind of cargo they were carrying. The moment their sensors identified the ship as human, they fled like ghosts back into the asteroid field. "That never gets old," Danny said while shaking his head in amazement. 3 years ago, those things would have killed us all without breaking a sweat. Now they run away like we have some kind of plague. Lisa finished her communication with the Altarian passengers and turned back to our station. "The passengers are asking if we can take a detour through the Crimson Nebula. They want to see the famous red clouds up close." The Crimson Nebula was beautiful, but it was also home to some of the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. Energy vampires, crystal spiders, and shadow wraiths all lived in those red clouds. But Jake knew that none of them would dare attack. "A human ship. Set course for the Crimson Nebula," Jake ordered. "But keep the shields up just in case. Our reputation might protect us, but there is no point in taking unnecessary risks." As the new dawn changed course toward the glowing red clouds, Jake wondered how long their reputation would last. It was built on one incident at a research station 3 years ago. What would happen if they actually had to fight one of the galaxy's deadliest predators? Would humanity live up to its fearsome reputation, or would everyone discover that they had just been lucky once? The stars stretched past the viewports as they entered hyperspace, carrying them toward another day of being the most feared species in 3 galaxies without firing a single shot. 3 years ago, Dr. Karen Phillips was having the best day of her research career. She had discovered a new form of plant life on Kepler 442b that could grow in zero gravity and produce oxygen at an incredible rate. The discovery could change how humans built space stations and ships forever. Karen was working in the biology lab of Kepler station when the alarm started screaming. She looked up from her microscope and saw the emergency lights flashing red across the ceiling. The automated voice was announcing something about unknown contacts approaching the station. Station Commander Ryan Garcia came running into the lab, with his security chief, Sergeant Kelly Martinez, right behind him. Ryan was a calm man who never seemed worried about anything, but today his face was pale and his hands were shaking. "We need to evacuate the station immediately," Ryan said, while helping Karen pack up her research samples. "The Shard Collective is coming, and we have maybe 6 hours before they arrive." Karen felt her blood turn cold at those words. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Shard Collective. They were a hive mind species that consumed entire star systems and left nothing but empty space behind them. No military force had ever successfully fought them and won. "How many ships?" Karen asked while sealing her samples in protective containers. "Our sensors count at least 50 bioships," Kelly replied. "Each one is the size of a small moon. They sent a message demanding our immediate surrender." Karen looked around the lab at 3 years of research work. All the discoveries, all the experiments, all the hope for humanity's future in space. The collective would destroy everything and turn the station into raw material for their hive. "We are not surrendering," Ryan said firmly. "I know we are just scientists and engineers, but we are also human. We do not give up without a fight." The next few hours were like a nightmare that would not end. The station's 37 people worked frantically to prepare for the impossible. They had no weapons except for a few security pistols and some mining tools. They had no shields except for the basic deflector system used to push away space debris. But they had something else. They had human creativity and the refusal to accept defeat. Dr. Phillips found herself working with Engineer Pete Johnson to turn the station's communication array into a weapon. Pete was a quiet man who knew every system on the station better than anyone else. He had an idea that might work if they could modify the equipment fast enough. The collective uses quantum entanglement to coordinate their hive mind, Karen explained. While they worked, if we can disrupt that connection, they might become confused and vulnerable. Pete nodded while connecting power cables to the communication dish. The problem is we need to know their exact frequency. One wrong guess and we just waste all our power. That was when Karen remembered something from her biology research. She had been studying how the local plant life communicated with each other through electromagnetic pulses. The frequency they used was very similar to what the collective might use for their hive mind. I think I know the frequency, Karen said, excitedly. The plants here use a natural quantum field that might be the same as what the collective uses. Meanwhile, other station personnel were preparing their own surprises. The maintenance crew, led by Joe Stevens, was turning the life support system into a series of traps. They removed oxygen from certain sections and filled them with industrial gases that would be toxic to most life forms. Lisa Park, the station's geologist, was working with the mining equipment to create explosive charges from the ore processing chemicals. She had never made bombs before, but she was learning fast from online manuals and pure desperation. Rayan Garcia coordinated everything while trying to keep everyone calm. He knew they had almost no chance of survival, but he also knew that humans had a history of doing impossible things when they were desperate enough. The Shard Collective's bioships arrived exactly when predicted. They were massive organic vessels that looked like giant insects made of crystal and metal. Each ship pulsed with its own inner light and moved with the fluid grace of a living creature. "They are hailing us," reported Communication Officer Brad Wilson from the command center. "They want to know if we are ready to surrender." Ryan looked around at his people. Scientists, engineers, maintenance workers, and one security officer. They were not soldiers, but they were ready to fight. "Tell them we decline their offer," Ryan said calmly. "And tell them that humans do not surrender." The first attack came an hour later. Shard fighters that looked like flying crystals swarmed around the station and began cutting through the hull with energy beams. The station's shields failed within minutes, and the air began leaking out into space, but the humans were ready. When the Shard warriors phased through the hull to board the station, they walked into sections filled with toxic gas. When they tried to coordinate their attacks, they found their hive mind connection disrupted by the modified communication. Array. Karen and Pete had guessed the frequency correctly. The quantum disruption field was causing feedback loops in the collective's neural network. Individual Shard warriors were becoming confused and disoriented without their hive mind guidance. "It is working," Pete shouted over the sound of explosions. "They are losing coordination." But the collective was not finished. They sent bigger ships with more powerful weapons. The station's hull was breaking apart, and several sections were completely destroyed. The humans had to retreat deeper into the station's core. That was when Lisa Park triggered her mining charges. The explosions ripped through 3 of the attacking bioships and sent the others retreating in confusion. The collective had never encountered prey that fought back so effectively. For 48 hours, the battle continued. The humans used every trick they could think of and invented new ones when the old ones stopped working. They turned their scientific equipment into weapons, their research into warfare, and their desperation into deadly creativity. Dr. Phillips found herself crawling through air vents to plant electromagnetic pulse devices near the collective's boarding parties. Engineer Johnson was using the station's gravity generators to crush attacking fighters. Everyone was doing jobs they had never trained for, and somehow making it work. The end came suddenly. The collective's hive mind reached a breaking point from all the quantum interference. The feedback loops had spread throughout their fleet, and the individual ships could no longer function properly. The massive bioships began retreating from the station in complete disorder. "They are running away," Kelly Martinez shouted from her position near the damaged hull. "The entire fleet is retreating." Ryan Garcia could barely believe what he was seeing. The Shard Collective, the most feared predator in 3 galaxies, was fleeing from a small research station defended by 37 humans. But the victory came at a cost. The station was destroyed, and 12 people had died in the fighting. The survivors were rescued by a human patrol fleet that arrived just as the collective ships disappeared into hyperspace. The last thing Karen Phillips saw before losing consciousness was a message being transmitted from the retreating collective. "Ships." It was broadcast on all frequencies in every language known to the galaxy. "The humans are not prey. They are the hunters. Avoid them. Fear them. They are death." News of the victory spread across 3 galaxies faster than any ship could travel. The species that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years had been defeated by a handful of human researchers. It was impossible, but it had happened. From that day forward, every alien species in known space understood one simple truth about humans. They were not just another weak species struggling to survive. They were something new and dangerous, and they would never surrender without a fight. The news from Kepler Station reached the Galactic Council chambers on Nexus Prime within hours of the battle's end. Ambassador Helen Rogers was in her office reviewing trade agreements when her assistant burst through the door with a datapad in his trembling hands. "Ambassador, you need to see this immediately," said Marcus Webb, a young diplomat who had never seen combat but understood its implications. "The Shard Collective has been defeated by humans." Helen looked up from her paperwork and saw the expression on Marcus's face. He was not joking or exaggerating. Something impossible had happened, and the galaxy was about to change forever. "Show me the report," Helen said while standing up and moving to her communication console. "And get me a direct line to Earth Command. They need to know about this before anyone else does." The report was incredible. 37 humans at a research station had defeated the most feared predator in 3 galaxies. They had used improvised weapons, converted scientific equipment, and pure human stubbornness to drive away a fleet that could have destroyed entire solar systems. But the most important part was not the victory itself. It was the message the collective had broadcast to every species in known space. They had declared humans to be hunters instead of prey and warned everyone to avoid them. "Get me an emergency session with the Galactic Council," Helen ordered. "Every species representative needs to hear this directly from us before they start making their own assumptions." The council chambers were packed with delegates from hundreds of different species. Helen had never seen so many different aliens in one place, and she had never seen them all looking so nervous and confused. The Thorian delegate stood up first. He was a massive reptilian creature with scales that could deflect laser fire and claws that could tear through metal. His species had been warriors for millions of years and had never lost a major battle. "This report cannot be accurate," the Thorian hissed through his razor-sharp teeth. "No species has ever defeated the Shard Collective in direct combat. They are the apex predator of 3 galaxies." Helen activated the holographic display and showed the recording from Kepler Station. The assembled delegates watched in silence as human researchers turned their laboratory into a battlefield and their scientific knowledge into weapons of war. They were the apex predator, Helen corrected, until they met humans who refused to. Accept defeat. The Valian representative raised her crystalline hand to speak. The Valians were an ancient species known for their wisdom and their powerful psychic abilities. They had studied warfare for thousands of years and understood its psychology better than most. The tactical analysis is impressive, the Valian said in her musical voice. But what concerns us is the psychological impact. The collective's message was broadcast to every species in known space. They have declared humans to be the new apex predator. Helen nodded grimly. She had already considered the implications and knew that humanity's life was about to become much more complicated. Being feared by every species in the galaxy was not necessarily better than being ignored. What makes humans different from other species? Asked the quantum delegate, a being of pure energy that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Many species have shown courage in battle. Many have used clever tactics. Why did the collective fear humans specifically? Helen had been thinking about that question since she first read the report. She had spent years studying human psychology and behavior, and she thought she understood what made her species unique. We do not recognize impossible, Helen said simply. Every other species in the galaxy has limits they will not cross, lines they will not step over. When faced with certain death, they accept it with dignity. Humans refuse to accept it at all. The assembly fell silent as the delegates absorbed this information. They were beginning to understand that humanity was not just another species that had gotten lucky in one battle. They were something fundamentally different. The collective has studied warfare for millions of years, Helen continued. They understand how prey species behave when cornered. They expect panic, desperation, and eventually surrender. What they found at Kepler Station was something they had never encountered before. The ethereal delegate materialized in the center of the chamber. The ethereals were beings of pure thought who existed beyond physical form and could see patterns that other species missed. When they spoke, everyone listened. The humans did not fight like prey, the ethereal said in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. They fought like predators who had been temporarily inconvenienced. They adapted, they learned, and they treated the collective's attack as a problem to be solved rather than a death sentence to be accepted. Helen smiled at the accuracy of that observation. That was exactly what had happened at Kepler Station. The humans had treated the most dangerous predator in the galaxy like a research project that needed to be completed. The psychological impact cannot be understated, the ethereal continued. The collective's warning was not just about human military capability. It was about human psychology. They recognized that humans will never stop fighting, never stop adapting, and never stop finding new ways to turn weakness into strength. The Zephyrian military representative stood up next. General Krikstal was known throughout the galaxy as a brilliant strategist who had never lost a battle. His species had conquered dozens of worlds, and his tactical knowledge was legendary. I have studied the recordings from Kepler Station, the general said in his clicking voice. The humans showed no advanced technology, no superior weapons, no overwhelming force. What they showed was something far more dangerous. Helen waited for him to continue, knowing that his next words would shape how the galaxy viewed humanity for generations to come. They showed the ability to innovate under pressure, the general continued. They took equipment designed for scientific research and turned it into weapons of war in a matter of hours. They used their knowledge of biology to disrupt the collectives. Neural network. They treated a hopeless situation as if it were merely difficult. The chamber erupted in discussion as delegates from different species began arguing about the implications. Some wanted to form alliances with humanity, others wanted to avoid them completely, and a few were suggesting that humans should be contained before they became too dangerous. Helen stood up and raised her hand for silence. The chamber gradually became quiet as hundreds of alien eyes focused on her. "The Galactic Council has a choice to make," Helen said in a clear, strong voice. "You can treat humanity as a threat to be contained, or you can recognize us as a valuable ally in a dangerous galaxy. But understand this, we did not choose to become the species that the collective fears. We simply refused to die quietly." The voting took place over the next 3 days. Species representatives debated, argued, and formed temporary alliances as they tried to decide how to respond to humanity's new status. Some wanted to grant humans full membership in the Galactic Council. Others wanted to establish trade restrictions, and a few wanted to limit human expansion into their territories. In the end, the Council reached a compromise. Humanity would be granted observer status and allowed to participate in galactic affairs, but they would also be subject to certain restrictions on their military expansion. It was not everything Helen had hoped for, but it was a start. The most important result was not the official decision. It was the unofficial understanding that spread throughout the galaxy in the days following the council session. Human ships were to be avoided, human territories were to be respected, and humans were to be treated with the kind of caution normally reserved for natural disasters. Helen returned to her office and found a message waiting for her from Earth Command. The government wanted to know how humanity should respond to their new reputation. Should they embrace it, downplay it, or try to use it to their advantage? Helen thought about the question for a long time before responding. Humanity had not asked to become the most feared species in 3 galaxies, but that was the reality they now faced. They could either accept it and use it wisely, or they could waste the opportunity that the heroes of Kepler Station had given them. She began typing her response to Earth Command, knowing that her words would help shape humanity's future among the stars. The galaxy had changed forever, and humans would never again be seen as just another weak species struggling to survive in a hostile universe. Captain Steve Collins was having the strangest day of his military career. His destroyer Horizon was patrolling the outer rim when they encountered the most dangerous pirate fleet in 3 galaxies. The Crimson Brotherhood had been terrorizing trade routes for over a century, and their leader, Captain Vex Moore, was wanted by every law enforcement agency in known space. But instead of attacking, the pirates had taken one look at the human ship and immediately jumped to hyperspace. They had not even bothered to scan the Horizon's cargo holds or demand tribute. They had simply run away like frightened children. "Sir, we are receiving a message from the pirate flagship," reported Lieutenant Carol Martinez from the communication station. "They are apologizing for entering our patrol area and requesting permission to leave peacefully." Steve looked at his tactical officer, Commander Rick Hansen, who was staring at his displays with complete confusion. Rick had been fighting pirates for 15 years and had never seen anything like this before. "Permission granted," Steve replied automatically. "Tell them to stay out of human space in the future." The pirate fleet disappeared into hyperspace within minutes, leaving the Horizon alone in empty space. Steve's crew was completely silent as they processed what had just happened. The most feared pirates in the galaxy had apologized to them and asked for permission to leave. "Remember when we used to actually fight pirates?" asked Chief Engineer Beth Parker while running diagnostics on the ship's weapon systems. "Now they just run away the moment they see us coming." Steve nodded while reviewing the tactical reports. The Crimson Brotherhood had enough firepower to destroy his ship 10 times over, but they had been too afraid to even get close enough to scan them properly. The reputation from Kepler Station was protecting every human ship in the galaxy. "It is not just pirates," said Navigator Tim Wong, while checking their course through the shipping lanes. "The insurance companies are calling human vessels the safest transport in 3 galaxies. Our ships can go anywhere without military escort." That was the economic reality of humanity's new status. Trade routes that had been abandoned for centuries were now reopening because human merchants could travel through them safely. Cargo companies were paying premium prices for human crews because they knew the ships would not be attacked. Steve remembered his first encounter with this new reality 6 months ago. The Horizon had been escorting a refugee convoy through the Void territories when they encountered a pack of crimson wraiths. The energy beings were known for destroying ships just for entertainment, and they had been circling the convoy like hungry sharks. But the moment the wraiths detected the human destroyer, they had simply vanished. No communication, no threats, no demands for tribute. They had identified the ship as human and immediately fled the area. "Incoming priority message from Fleet Command," announced Lieutenant Martinez. "They want us to investigate reports of Nexus Raider activity in the Cygnus sector." And Nexus Raiders were cyborg pirates who felt no pain and no fear. They were considered the most dangerous criminals in the galaxy because they could not be intimidated or reasoned with. Their cybernetic implants made them immune to most forms of psychological warfare. "Set course for the Cygnus sector," Steve ordered. "Maximum speed." As the Horizon jumped to hyperspace, Steve wondered if the Raiders would be different from other threats they had encountered. The cybernetic pirates were not supposed to be capable of fear, but every species in the galaxy had said that about the Shard Collective too. They dropped out of hyperspace near a damaged freighter that was sending out a distress signal. The ship belonged to the Altarian Trading Guild and appeared to have been attacked by energy weapons. But there were no signs of the raiders anywhere in the area. "Sir, we are receiving a message from the freighter," reported Martinez. "They say the raiders fled the moment they detected our hyperspace signature approaching the system." Steve was starting to understand the full implications of humanity's reputation. It was not just that aliens were afraid of humans in direct combat. They were afraid of humans existing anywhere in the same star system. "Long-range sensors are picking up raider ships near the asteroid belt," reported Commander Hansen. "They appear to be maintaining a distance of at least 50,000 kilometers from our position." A tactical display showed 6 raider vessels hiding behind the largest asteroid. They were armed with enough firepower to destroy the Horizon and the freighter, but they were keeping their distance like wild animals, avoiding a larger predator. "Hail the raider ships," Steve ordered. "Let them know we are here to investigate the attack on the freighter." The response came back immediately. The raider captain's voice was distorted by cybernetic implants, but the fear was still clearly audible. He was apologizing for the attack and promising to leave the system immediately. "Human warship, we did not know this was your territory," the raider captain said in a mechanical voice. "We will depart immediately and avoid this sector in the future." Steve looked around his bridge at the amazed expressions on his crew's faces. The Nexus Raiders were supposed to be fearless killing machines, but they were acting like scared children who had been caught breaking the rules. "Understood," Steve replied. "Make sure this does not happen again." The raider ships jumped to hyperspace within minutes, leaving the damaged freighter alone in space. Steve ordered his crew to provide assistance to the Altarian ship and then filed his report with Fleet Command. The pattern was the same everywhere human ships went. Pirates fled, raiders avoided them, and even military patrols from hostile species gave them plenty of space. The galaxy had become a much safer place for humans, but it had also become a much lonelier one. Dr. Patricia Wong was studying this phenomenon from her research station on Luna. She was the galaxy's leading expert on interspecies psychology and had been analyzing the behavioral changes in alien species since the Kepler station incident. "It is not simple fear," she explained during a video conference with Fleet Command. "The aliens are not just afraid of humans winning a fight. They are afraid of humans existing at all." Admiral Frank Roberts was listening to the briefing from his office on Earth. He had been trying to understand the strategic implications of humanity's new reputation and needed expert analysis to plan for the future. "Explain what you mean by that," the Admiral said while reviewing tactical reports from across human space. The collective's message was very specific, Dr. Wong replied. They did not just warn other species about human military capability. They warned them about human psychology. They identified humans as a fundamentally different type of predator. The Admiral nodded thoughtfully. He had been wondering why even. The most aggressive alien species were avoiding human contact completely instead of just approaching them more carefully. The Galaxy's predators understand that humans will never stop fighting, Dr. Wong continued. They recognize that humans will adapt to any situation and find ways to turn disadvantages into advantages. This makes humans unpredictable and therefore dangerous. The economic implications were staggering. Human trade had increased by 300% in the past year because their ships could travel safely through the most dangerous regions of space. Mining operations were expanding into previously hostile territories because human workers were not being attacked, but there were also diplomatic challenges. Some species wanted to form alliances with humanity, others wanted to avoid them completely, and a few were beginning to resent the advantages that humans enjoyed. We need to be careful about how we use this reputation, the Admiral said during his next briefing with the Joint Chiefs. We did not earn it through conquest or aggression. We earned it through desperate defense of our people. General Sandra Hayes, the head of Marine Corps operations, was reviewing reports from human colonies on the frontier. The settlements were expanding rapidly because colonists knew they would be safe from alien attacks. The problem is that our reputation is based on one incident, she said while pointing to star charts showing human expansion. What happens if we actually have to fight one of these predators again? Will we live up to the legend, or will everyone discover that we just got lucky once? That was the question that kept Admiral Roberts awake at night. Humanity's reputation was protecting them throughout the galaxy, but it was also a challenge to every predator who wanted to test whether the stories were true. We need to make sure we are prepared for that test, the Admiral said firmly, because sooner or later something will be desperate enough or proud enough to find out if humans are really as dangerous as the collective claimed. The stars continued to shine down on human space, where ships traveled safely through regions that had been death traps for other species. The reputation earned by 37 researchers at Kepler Station was protecting millions of humans across 3 galaxies. But reputations were fragile things, and the galaxy was full of predators who were watching and waiting for their chance to discover the truth about humanity's legendary determination. Jake Morrison was finishing his daily reports when the emergency alert came through. The merchant vessel New Dawn had been traveling peacefully through the outer rim when their sensors detected something that made his blood run cold. A distress signal was coming from the research vessel Discovery, and it was not from pirates or raiders. "Captain, you need to see this," said Lisa Turner, while forwarding the message to his command screen. The Discovery is under attack by something called the Harbinger Fleet. Jake had never heard of the Harbinger Fleet, but the sensor readings were terrifying. The attacking ships were massive, ancient, and completely unlike anything in the galactic databases. They moved with a fluid grace that suggested organic technology, but their weapon signatures were purely mechanical. "Get me a communication channel with the Discovery," Jake ordered, "and send an emergency message to the nearest human fleet. We might need backup." Dr. Sarah Wilson appeared on the main screen, her research station's bridge flickering with emergency lights behind her. She was the Discovery's chief scientist and had been studying ancient artifacts in the Kepler Nebula when the attack began. "Jake, thank goodness you are here," Sarah said while explosions echoed in the background. "We accidentally activated some kind of beacon while studying pre-collective ruins. These ships appeared out of nowhere, and they are not responding to any communication attempts." Jake studied the tactical display and realized they were facing something completely new. The Harbinger ships were not like any known alien design. They seemed to be automated vessels from a civilization that had existed before the Shard Collective ruled the galaxy. "How long can you hold out?" Jake asked while his crew prepared the new dawn for combat. "Maybe an hour," Sarah replied. "Our shields are failing, and we have no weapons. These things are treating us like we are some kind of infection that needs to be eliminated." That was when Jake realized the full implications of what was happening. For 3 years, humanity's reputation had protected them from every threat in the galaxy. But these ancient ships had been sleeping for millions of years. They had never heard of Kepler Station and did not know that humans were supposed to be feared. "Amy, get us to the Discovery as fast as possible," Jake ordered. "Danny, start working on our weapon systems. We might actually have to fight this time." The New Dawn was not a warship. It was a cargo freighter with basic defensive systems and a crew that had never fired a shot in anger. But they were human, and humans did not abandon their own people when they were in trouble. They dropped out of hyperspace just as the Discovery's shields failed completely. The research vessel was surrounded by 12 Harbinger ships that were systematically destroying its hull with energy weapons. The ancient vessels were beautiful in their alien design, but they were also clearly intent on total destruction. "Harbinger ships, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel New Dawn," Jake announced on all frequencies. "You are attacking a peaceful research vessel. Stand down immediately or face the consequences." The response was immediate and terrifying. All 12 Harbinger ships turned toward the New Dawn with mechanical precision. Their weapons began charging with a low humming sound that could be heard even through the vacuum of space. "They are not impressed by our reputation," Danny Brooks said grimly while activating the ship's defensive systems. "These things have never heard of humans before." Jake realized they were facing the test that every human had been dreading. For 3 years, their reputation had protected them from every threat in the galaxy. But now they were facing an enemy that did not know humans were supposed to be feared. "Lisa, send a message to the Discovery," Jake ordered. "Tell them to evacuate their people to the escape pods. We are going to try something desperate." The New Dawn was not designed for combat, but it was designed by humans. The cargo bays could be pressurized and depressurized rapidly. The mining equipment could be converted into weapons, and the navigation deflectors could be overloaded to create an electromagnetic pulse. "Amy, take us directly at the largest Harbinger ship," Jake commanded. "Danny, prepare to vent the cargo bay on my signal. We are going to ram them." The crew looked at him with expressions of shock and determination. They all knew this was probably a suicide mission, but they also knew that humans did not retreat when their own people were in danger. The New Dawn accelerated toward the Harbinger fleet at maximum speed. The ancient ships opened fire with energy weapons that could have destroyed a small moon. But Jake was counting on their cargo ship being too small and fast to hit accurately. "Cargo bay venting in 3, 2, 1, Danny announced. The explosive decompression sent thousands of tons of mining equipment flying toward the Harbinger ships like a shotgun blast. The ancient vessels were forced to maneuver to avoid the debris, which disrupted their weapons formation. "Now hit them with the deflector pulse," Jake ordered. Amy overloaded the navigation deflectors and sent a massive electromagnetic pulse toward the Harbinger fleet. The pulse was designed to push away space debris, but when overloaded, it could disrupt electronic systems. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Harbinger ships began spinning out of control as their ancient navigation systems failed. Their weapons stopped firing, and their formation collapsed into chaos. It worked. Lisa shouted from her station. "Their systems are crashing." But Jake knew they had only bought themselves a few minutes. The Harbinger ships were already beginning to recover from the electromagnetic pulse, and the New Dawn had used up most of its tricks. "Danny, Can you give me more power to the engines? Jake asked while watching the tactical display. I can give you everything we have, Danny replied. But it will burn out the drive systems. We will be dead in space after one more acceleration. Jake looked at the Discovery, which was still taking damage from the recovering Harbinger ships. The research vessel had maybe 5 minutes before it was completely destroyed. Do it, Jake ordered. Get us between the Discovery and those ships. The New Dawn accelerated one final time, its engines burning out as it positioned itself between the research vessel and the Harbinger fleet. Jake knew they could not fight 12 ancient warships with a disabled cargo freighter, but they could buy time for the Discovery to escape. That was when something unexpected happened. The Harbinger ships stopped their attack and began transmitting a message on all frequencies. The alien language was untranslatable, but the tone was clearly one of confusion and uncertainty. They are scanning us, Amy reported. All 12 ships are focusing their sensors on the New Dawn. The scanning continued for several minutes while Jake and his crew waited for the inevitable attack. But instead of weapons fire, they received a communication in broken galactic standard. Small ship, you defend the research vessel, the Harbinger captain said in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. You sacrifice yourself for others. This is not expected behavior for prey species. Jake realized that the ancient ships were learning about humanity in real time. They had been programmed to eliminate threats, but they were also capable of recognizing unexpected behavior patterns. We are not a prey species, Jake replied firmly. We are human. We protect our own. The Harbinger fleet fell silent for a long moment while they processed this information. Jake could see their weapon systems powering down as they tried to understand what they were dealing with. Human, the Harbinger captain repeated slowly. The quantum archives contain references to this species. Ancient warnings from the collective. They called you hunters. Jake felt a surge of pride at those words. Even after 3 years, the collective's message was still protecting humanity from threats they had never imagined. The archives say humans cannot be defeated through conventional warfare, the Harbinger captain continued. They adapt, they learn, they refuse to surrender. Is this assessment accurate? Jake looked around his bridge at his crew. They had just disabled 12 ancient warships using mining equipment and navigation deflectors. They had turned a cargo freighter into a weapon and used their own ship as a shield to protect strangers. Yes, Jake said simply. That assessment is accurate. The Harbinger fleet began withdrawing from the battle area, their ancient ships moving with renewed respect for the small human vessel. Before they departed, their captain sent one final message. The archives also contain tactical assessments of human psychology, the Harbinger captain said. They recommend avoiding contact with human vessels unless absolutely necessary. We will honor these ancient warnings. As the Harbinger fleet disappeared into hyperspace, Jake realized that humanity had passed another test. They had proven once again that their reputation was not based on luck or propaganda, but on the fundamental human refusal to give up when faced with impossible odds. Captain, we are receiving a message from the Discovery, Lisa announced. Doctor, Wilson wants to thank us for saving her research team. Jake nodded while looking out at the stars. The New Dawn was dead in space with burned-out engines, but they had accomplished their mission. The Discovery was safe, and the Harbinger fleet had learned to respect human determination. Send a message to Fleet Command, Jake ordered. Tell them we encountered an unknown threat and resolved it peacefully. Also tell them we are going to need a tow back to the nearest starbase. As they waited for Race,